Welcome back to the Deliberate Exchange podcast. Today I want to talk to you about transformation, since obviously this is part of what I do, is transformations in myself and helping other people. But I want to highlight that real transformation isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about removing what no longer serves you. And so in this episode, I'm sharing the 10 things that I let go of to create space for real joy, for confidence, for true authentic alignment. If you've been feeling overwhelmed or stuck or disconnected from yourself, these shifts are going to help you root into presence, to take deliberate action, and to start living a life that you actually want. So the real change that you want, and quite frankly, probably the change that you need, is never going to come from piling on more responsibilities or gaining more approval or proving yourself through doing. To create sustainable change, you must first clear space. And that means removing the people, the places, the habits, the thought patterns, even the identities that are no longer aligned. And that requires radical honesty. And then your mind is going to try and convince you that it's easier to stay the same. It's going to whisper like, it's not that bad. But you have to challenge that. Because as they say, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. So I'm going to share the 10 things that I let go of that help me to reclaim my energy, to connect back to myself, and to finally create the peace and confidence that I was always chasing and never seemed to get a hold of. If you are in a season where you are feeling overwhelmed or stuck or just completely disconnected from who you are, from the ones that you love, and from the life that you either have right now or the one that you thought you'd have, this is for you. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is letting go of people pleasing. Now, we are wired for connection. I've talked about this in previous episodes. It is part of our biology. Our nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of safety. Like do I belong? Am I accepted? Is it safe for me to be myself here? And so it makes sense that people pleasing would become a protective strategy. For me, it wasn't always about just being nice, though. It was about survival. I desperately didn't want to be the bad guy, even though I ended up being the bad guy in a couple different movies. I wanted to be seen as helpful, accommodating, the one who could show up for everyone. And I wanted everyone to like me. I thought if people liked me, I would feel safe and valued and important. But the problem is that kind of validation is completely outsourced. And so then it had me saying yes to the things that I didn't want to do. And then I was overextending myself. And then I ended up tired, resentful, and disconnected from my own needs. And then I still wasn't feeling seen the way that I wanted to be. And that always came at the expense of myself. And so letting go of people pleasing meant risking people not liking me, which is hard. And it meant letting go of always chasing the gold stars, which I loved getting. But it also meant I could finally start doing the things that actually felt aligned. And when I started asking myself, like with, again, radical honesty, like, am I doing this because it's true for me? Or is it because I want somebody to like me? Everything changed with that question. My energy became mine again. And ironically, the more I honored myself, the more authentically I could show up for others, my family, my friends, my work. My capacity increased by putting the focus on myself first. Which leads me to releasing the need to have it all figured out. Now, this was pretty big because I loved being the one who was on it. The one who had the plan, the one who could map it out, troubleshoot it, fix it. Control felt really, really good and was like a safety blanket. But that safety was an illusion. Because I thought if I just planned enough, prepared enough, anticipated every single outcome, I could avoid pain and failure. Because failure, let's be honest, sucks. But all it did was trap me in anxiety. My brain was always running simulations. Like, what if this happens? What if that doesn't work? What if I make the wrong choice? And like, I'm in this purgatory. Now, your nervous system isn't designed to thrive in that kind of hypervigilance. Like, yes, hypervigilance is necessary sometimes, but when we live in constant what if mode, we are signaling to our bodies that we are under threat, even when we're not. And those prolonged states of stress have real significant consequences: adrenal fatigue, poor sleep, low immunity, even hormone disruption. Releasing the need to have it all figured out meant trusting that I could handle things as they come. It meant shifting from control to curiosity, shifting from outcome obsession to present moment awareness. Now, this is not done overnight. You don't have to know exactly how it's going to work out. You just have to take the next deliberate step, and then the next, and then the next. Trust is a muscle, and letting go of needing the whole map has been one of the most freeing things I've ever done. Okay, so with that foundation, I had to start really looking at where there was drama happening in my life and a lot of energy drainers. There was a time in my life where my brand was chaos. I thrived on fire. I wore stress like a badge of honor. I wanted to have the wild story to tell, the outrageous moment, the inside scoop. I wanted to be memorable. And I wanted accolades for like how much I did. But that came at a cost. Like, I would always be going to lunch dates or texting the people who always left me feeling drained. Like, they were not in alignment with certainly who I wanted to become, but it just felt comfortable. I entertained these conversations that were more gossip than growth. And I thought that being in the loop kept me connected, but it was really keeping me dysregulated. It's important to understand that our energy is a currency. And if you are spending yours on drama or chaos or relationships that suck the life right out of you, you're going to feel empty no matter how much self-care you try and pour on top. Letting go of energy drainers was about choosing peace over the noise, boundaries over access. And I started asking, like, does this give me energy or does it take it away? And the answers started to become very obvious when I started asking those questions. And it was also kind of stemming from when I read Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying. And her principle for tidying is holding a thing in your hands and seeing if it sparked joy. So the same kind of thing I applied to the people, the places, the habits that I was doing or that I was spending time with, and what was bringing me joy or what was draining my energy or what was giving me energy. And that really paved the way for where I am today. Now let's shift into talking about the negative self-talk because this was like such a poignant part in my healing journey. It's also something that I hear a lot in the people that I spend time with. When they make these jokes about themselves, like the self-deprecating humor, or they're being like admonishing towards themselves or what they've done. And what I try and remind people of is that your brain is always listening to the words that you say to yourself. And it doesn't understand the difference between when you're joking or not. And so for years, my self-talk was a bully. I would call myself lazy or undisciplined or a failure, or I would echo and parrot the things that had been said to me before by others. You're just a dumb, uneducated hick. You will never do anything of consequence. You're not saving the world or saving lives. And so like I took those as my own, and I would be in front of a mirror sometimes and just saying how much I hate myself. I really thought that being hard on myself was how I would get better, that like tough love kind of adage. And while I still think that a little bit of tough love or like gentle parenting is required, it can't be all there is, especially when you're already working at a deficit in your self-worth, your self-esteem. But I really thought that if I pushed more, criticized more, it would finally motivate me to get it right. I would be sprung into action. But the neuroscience tells us that shame actually reduces our capacity to change. Self-compassion, not self-criticism, is what creates sustainable motivation. Because when your nervous system feels safe, it opens up and you have the capacity to do things. When it's threatened, it shuts down and there's no chance of doing the things that you actually want to do that will move the needle in your life. Changing my inner dialogue was like reparenting myself. I started to interrupt the mean girl thoughts and ask, like, would I say this to somebody that I love? Because quite frankly, if I said some of the things to some of my friends that I had been saying to myself, I would have no friends. And then if it wasn't something that I would say to somebody that I love, I had to I had to let it go. This isn't about being delusional or ignoring growth. It's about rooting your growth in love instead of fear. You get to choose the frequency that you feed, and I want you to choose love over fear. Okay, so productivity. Who doesn't love to be productive? But we live in that culture that glorifies the hustle. That rest is seen as lazy, that slowness is shameful. And I was that person that felt guilty watching a movie if I hadn't earned it. My worth was so deeply tied to my output. But your body is not a machine. You are not a machine. You are a cyclical, emotional, intuitive being, and you do need rest. Even if you think you don't, you do. Not as a reward, but as a requirement. Your nervous system thrives in rhythm. We need activation and recovery. Productivity without pause leads to burnout. And so letting go of the 24/7 grind meant redefining what success looks like for me. It meant honoring my energy, my needs, my humanness. Even my mom commented like, "Oh, you're always doing so much like for everybody else." And while yes, I agree with her, the checks and balances that I have in place now to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and resting when I need it is most definitely there. And so I'm not coming at anything that I'm doing from a deficit. All right, so the past. The past feels so comforting to think about, but we typically have an attachment to the past. I recently heard a statistic that 50% of our waking time is spent in either the past or the future, which is a significant amount of our time. And we're walking around, trying to walk forward while dragging the past around like a weighted blanket. Now, this could be in the form of old identities or past mistakes or a version of the life that we thought we'd have. All of that keeps us stuck or really slow momentum. I had to grieve the life that I imagined. I had to grieve the version of me that I thought I should be. I had to let go of what could have been in order to embrace what is. And of course, now I understand that our nervous system doesn't like uncertainty. Who does? It wants familiar, even if that familiar is painful. But presence, like true presence, requires us to loosen our grip on the past. Letting go here meant forgiveness and compassion and the radical act of deciding that my past doesn't get to define me anymore. And there are a bunch of really great books on the whole concept of presence and our ties to the past. You can look at Michael Singer and Untethered, or The Power of Now is another great book. I will link those in the show notes so that you can have a look at those. Okay, so I think that the next logical topic to talk about is releasing the unrealistic expectations that we have of ourselves. Somewhere along the line, I decided I had to do it all. I wanted to be it all. I never wanted to drop the ball. I wanted to show up perfectly and, of course, do it with a smile because it felt good. And that goes back to like the people pleasing aspect. Like I wanted to be seen as helpful and accommodating and get those accolades for doing. But that's not reality. That is complete self-abandonment. Holding myself to impossible standards only fueled my shame and my burnout and my stress. It really sat well with the inner critic, the never good enough loop, so letting go of these expectations meant meeting myself with gentleness, which when I'd been living in such a masculine energy, gentleness was really hard to come by. But I also had to redefine success. And this meant knowing that I can show up fully and still need rest and space and support. And when I allowed myself to just be and release those expectations of being perfect, life became a lot easier. There was less resistance, less pain, less suffering. And I was able to do more and feel better. Which leads us to external validation. Again, this ties into the people pleasing that I talked about at the start, but this goes a little bit deeper. Because when we're constantly looking outside of ourselves for approval, we lose our own voice. I used to rely on applause to feel valuable. Those compliments, the likes, the gold stars, especially like in our Instagram driven world. You post something and you can't wait to see when you come back in the notifications of how many people have liked it. Like, I'm still guilty of that. But that is fleeting, and chasing it made me perform rather than live. Letting go of external validation meant turning inward. I had to learn to trust my own intuition and then create a sense of internal safety that didn't rely on others. Like, I had to be my biggest cheerleader first and foremost, and then everything else was a cherry on top. So stress. Stress is something that we can't take away, but sometimes it can become our baseline, and it had certainly become mine. I didn't know who I was without constant stress and without that adrenaline. Like I mentioned earlier, like I was that hair on fire, thriving under chaos type of girl. But that long-term stress changes your brain and your body. I was always bracing. I was always tense. My shoulders were up around my ears because I was always stressed about everything. And as it turns out, stress, long-term stress, actually shrinks part of your brain. It shrinks the hippocampus, like that's your memory. It actually impairs your digestion. It disrupts your sleep. It weakens your immunity. Again, it disrupts your hormones. Like, it is no good when we are not dealing with it, when we're not managing it. And so I had to stop treating stress like a personality trait. I had to learn how to regulate. I had to learn how to breathe, to slow down. And that wasn't easy at first, but then it became a lot easier once I learned the tools that actually move the needle. And as I said, the stress doesn't go away, but how we respond to it can improve. And it's the in-between, outside of the stressful moments that happen, right? Good people are going to die, bad things are going to happen, and how we deal with that matters. But it's in that in-between where we learn to regulate our nervous system, where we learn to create calm in our body, where we learn just to sense for when we're carrying unnecessary tension, right? Even right now, like if you're sitting here listening to this, I want you to just feel into your body. Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders tense? Is your stomach tight? Like, can you just find a couple of points of relaxation in your body right now? And then I want you to ask yourself, what would it look like if peace was your baseline instead? So the through line of everything I've shared is trust. Learning to trust myself meant listening to my body, because the body is like the most intuitive tool that we have, not our brain, which can get us into trouble, but our body. I had to trust my timing. I had to let things unfold without having a vice grip hold on them. It's still a practice. It's one I return to daily because I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it all out. And I want to tell you that too, that you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take the next right step. Letting go isn't always easy, but when you do let go, what you gain is space. And we need space. Like if we're so full of like all the other noise, it's hard to call in the peace and energy and alignment. So if this episode has resonated in any way, I'd love for you to let me know. Let me know like which aspect of it was like deeply resonant or you want to work on. And I hope that this gave you permission to release something that's been heavy and have you move a little bit closer to the life that you actually want. And as a reminder, you're worth it. And please share this episode with somebody who might need to hear it. Rate, review is really helpful for the algorithm. And in the meantime, breathe it in, be deliberate, and please be good to yourself.